Insert sad music here. Remember, if you're cold, they're cold. Bring them inside. It is pretty cold outside. What's going on, guys? It is a little bit on the chilly side, and so that's given me the opportunity to bring the bike in and make some adjustments. I have just recently finished adjusting the rear chain and am in the process of setting up the angle for the shifter lever to the peg. You can see here right around 38, 39 degrees. I kind of like around 38 to 40 degrees for the angle for both the shifter and the brake. I got used to that with the Daytona, and it's very comfortable. If you've never thought to adjust this, if you adjust that lever down, it'll give you a little bit more leverage, if you will, shifting up on the motorcycle. So I've always just kind of found that that was a very comfortable setting for me. I believe this one from the factory was around 35 degrees, which, believe it or not, is quite a bit. As you can see, that's where it is now engaging the shifter pawl, if you will, up here to go ahead and make that next shift, as you can see. So I've adjusted it down quite a bit from factory. That's what I'm working on right now. But I'm also working on, there's the clutch cable right there, making sure, get that clutch cable just right. This is how much clutch gap I like to have. There you go. Making sure I turn the handlebars, because that will move the cables around. Sometimes you can get a little bit of a bind, but just making sure that we've got enough play there, which is good. And that's what I'm up to, guys. Making some slight adjustments, getting this bike just right. With just the other side of 700 miles, we are pretty much on the downside of the break-in period. So, and this is kind of part of the break-in period, making the bike your own, getting all the adjustments just right. Speaking of adjustments, suspension adjustments. So I have adjusted front sag to 37 millimeters. The rear from the factory had me sitting right at 35 millimeters, which I liked. All of the hydraulics, which is to say compression and rebound dampening, are a quarter turn out. This bike was a little bit on the stiff side from the factory. Turning it a quarter out seems to have made it a little bit more compliant and a little bit better for the street. Still very stable at high speeds on the side of the tire, and straight up and down, wide open, the bike just seems a bit more planted. So again, just adjusting the bike, going through break-in, making it basically my bike now, and can start really playing around with this thing now that we're getting some miles on it. Now, there are some future plans for this bike. We'll probably move to this is a factory 45 tooth rear sprocket, might move to a 44 or a 43 out back to go along with the tune that this bike will eventually get. So let's chat about this thing real quick, give you some ideas for what the future plans are for this machine. Okay, guys, so I mentioned a tune and re-gearing. The reason for the tune is to try to get rid of some of that snatchiness that this throttle has at mid RPM tip in. So when you're just cracking into the throttle from not only full decel, but even at slack throttle, the deceleration fuel cutoff in that range of RPM of say 4,000 to 9,000 RPM can be somewhat abrupt. And what I've noticed is, even if I'm on the side of the tire and I'm at slack throttle at say 7,000 RPM, to then roll into the throttle, sometimes you'll get a little bit of a kick. It's more of a punch, really. And it doesn't really ever unsettle the bike, but it is just something that becomes distracting at that point. And so the more time I've spent with the bike, the more I have picked up on that. And because of that, I thought, it might be a good idea to go ahead and tune the bike. Now, I am tuning it as it sits right now as a stock bike. I'm really not interested in throwing full exhaust or air filter or whatever at the bike just yet. Guys, it's a GSXR 1000. It makes plenty of power, and really any power that it picks up is going to be from the elimination of some nannies way on the right hand side of the graph. In other words, from say 11 or 12,000 RPM to 14,000 RPM, that's where a lot of the power is going to be picked up. It may pick up some through the mid-range, but that's really not the point. The idea is just to get rid of that snatchy throttle. And again, I really wouldn't complain so much about it if it just wasn't happening when I've got the bike on the side of the tire and I'm pretty committed at that point, hitting an apex of a bend and I'm rolling into the throttle as I'm standing the bike up. It's just as I'm rolling into the throttle that you'll feel that little nudge sometimes. And it's, again, just a bit of a pet peeve of mine now with the bike. Which leads me into the re-gear. The bike will be making a bit more power, and to be able to manage that, I may go with a slightly smaller rear sprocket. It's got a factory 45 tooth out back. What I will do is probably go to a 44 or a 43. That's going to move the rear tire back ever so slightly, which means I may need to throw a little bit more preload onto the rear shock to help maintain that 35 millimeters of sag out back. But the point is, I want to be able to manage whatever little bit more power I have a bit more effectively, because this bike with the 45 tooth rear sprocket, 17 tooth front is fairly aggressively geared, even for the stock tune. And it has a fun habit, but a habit nonetheless, of floating the front tire in every gear once you start getting the thing above, say, 10,000 RPM. And so again, to be able to manage the extra power that it's making, or even the power that it has now, going down a couple of teeth on that back sprocket is going to help that. Matter of fact, the old school GSXR 1000s all ran 1742 gearing with the same primary drive reduction in the transmission. So this is not anything new. The 1745 was actually a pretty popular upgrade for a lot of folks back in the day. Well, these bikes are making a lot of power, and they can be a bit lively with the factory gearing if you start throwing more power at them with a tune or what have you. So those are the plans for the bike. Get it adjusted, get it all set up, get a tune on this thing, and then from there I'll determine if I want to put a different gear in it. I'm not going to do that immediately. I'll wait till the other tire, which, talking about the back tire on this, Bridgestone RS11s are really good. We'll absolutely be going back with another one of those. So with that, guys, though, I'll go ahead and wrap it up. Post up your comments. Let me know what you think about this bike. Did you ever think about adjusting your shifter and your brake levers for your bike? If you haven't, you might want to take a look at that. Could make it a bit more comfortable for you. Let me know what you're doing with your bike this winter. We'll catch you on the next one. Thanks for stopping by.